Also stop the boondoggles. For example, when they rebuilt the, well, I could take either the, I call it the Douglas B and the Congress A. That's the way I learned it when I was young and rode on it all. I could take either one of those back, the Congress or the Douglas, and get home at the same time. It made sense to build tracks like that, rapid transit systems, in 1895, okay, before the invention of the motor car. I mean, those two systems run about a mile apart, a little over a mile apart, and they run parallel. And so we argued, don't rebuild the Douglas line. Stop it at the medical center, and then run an express bus from downtown, out Ogden, out Cermak. The buses would cost $15 million, $19 million for 60 buses, instead of $500 million to reconstruct a 19th century railroad. Now, that's the kind of thing they're doing. We recommended also that instead of building the Orange Line down to Midway, that they use the existing commuter railroads, put some new stations in there. They could have done that for $50 million, but oh no, $500 million is what we want to do. They pick the most expensive thing to do. They don't look at low-cost alternatives, and as a result, they're short on capital funds.
Well, I think that Phil might argue with you on whether the alternatives are looked at, but before we further engage that, let me just add that if anyone has any questions out there, as usual, just raise your hand. Marin, I think you can grab the microphone from this podium here and bring it over. We'd love to hear from you, as always. Phil, when you have some of these major capital planning processes, you're going through a long, involved planning process now. That is not to say that some of these larger expenses don't bear some scrutiny, but there are some levels where you look at the different opportunities, the different alternatives for a major capital project of transportation.
I mean, I will just use the Star Line, and you know what Jim says, there is some truth. And from a federal perspective, there's been many federal transit projects that initially were built, and you scratch your head and you wonder why they were built. I think from a federal perspective, as well as what we're trying to do within this region, that does not happen as often. For example, on the Star Line, we're into a 2-year alternatives analysis process as to should there be express bus rapid transit, the type of commuter rail, and what we're settling on is just DMU service along the toll road and then along the EJ&E. We think that project is worthy. We're going through the process.
So that's an existing railroad line.
One of the existing, and then actually the toll road will be right in the median. I mean, I would like to tell Jim that, as John fully knows, Metro engaged on 3 new START projects, major improvement and extension on the west line of the Union Pacific, which is right in DuPage County. We extended it out from Geneva out to LaFox and Elburn. We doubled the service on the North Central, and we doubled the service on the Southwest. The project was done 1 year ahead of time and $50 million on the budget. So sometimes things do go right.
Thanks to you. We have a question out here from the audience.
Excuse me. As I understand it, this year was one of the highest number of passengers from public transportation standpoint. If you can't make money when you have the highest transportation number of people you're servicing, how are you going to make money when passengers drop? In the private sector, we'd have to cut or we'd have to adjust for that. And then secondly, I'm with a major corporation who recently stopped their pension plan, and so I'm wondering why the governmental agencies feel as though they're entitled to this project.
Well, if I can answer that, nothing in transportation is self-supporting. To say why can't mass transit pay for itself out of the fare box just isn't realistic. The airlines don't make any money. I mean, Southwest is the only carrier that's actually made a profit. The other airlines are finally making marginal profits, and they're heavily subsidized by the federal government. The FAA provides air traffic services around the country, so it does require a subsidy. You could raise fares up to $7, $8 a ride, and it's still not going to cover costs. It's just a very expensive commodity to provide.
And if you're going to continue starting to pay bus drivers $30,000, $35,000 starting up, and then pay them up to $80,000, and then pay out those pension benefits. I mean, this is The problem is, of course, it's run by the government. That's why it's so expensive. I mean, I just gave you examples earlier of cities where they privatized the bus service, and the costs have dropped, and that could be done here too as well. I'll tell you one thing they did a couple of years back, about 10 years back. The Daley administration wanted to put in a downtown central area circulator. We call it the strangulator. And we beat it. We beat that one down. That central area strangulator was a 19th century streetcar. They call them light trolleys, you see. They call them now light rail. Light rail, that's what it's called now. But it's essentially a trolley, 19th century technology. It would have cost $1 billion to construct, and then it would have operated at a loss forever and ever. Well, you know, it's a ridiculous.
Let me just say,
even though we did kill it.
That privatization means that you can somehow make a profit from this. I mean, it's like garbage collection. You know, you can have the city collect your garbage, or you can contract with a private company to collect your garbage. Making a private company collect garbage doesn't somehow make garbage worth something. It's simply saying that you can find, you know, another player who can provide the same public service at slightly less of a taxpayer loss. Could privatization of some of these things, you know, save on the margins? Yeah, probably. I mean, the devil's in the details. But the notion that you could somehow have the private sector come in to, you know, the current economy step in and make a profit running trains where the public sector has been unable to is simply impossible.
Commuter rail is a perfect example. I mean, 50% of our service is run by the private sector. It's run by the Union Pacific and the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. Their labor rates are higher than ours. Their pension benefits are better than ours. So, you know, now, PACE, as I understand it, a good portion or a portion of their service is run by the private sector.
Well, I wasn't talking about trains. I was talking about buses, and other cities privatize the buses, and they operate at a lower cost.
John Hukovich, there
and
has
there are
been
less
some
tax
move
subsidies.
towards
But I want to
privatization.
finish about what I was saying about the circulator, strangulator. Even though they didn't build it, they managed to spend $60 million of taxpayer money on planning. Mr. Schlickman's really good at that. Didn't even lay 1 inch of track, let alone 1 mile, but they spent $60 million on planning that billion-dollar boondoggle, and I'm so glad we beat it down.
The General Accountability Office came out with a study just this week saying that the benefits of privatization are way overblown. What happens is the private sector likes to cherry pick. They pick the projects that are no-brainers. Leasing the Chicago Skyway. The City of Chicago rebuilds the Skyway and then leases it to a company. City of Chicago rebuilds Midway Airport. Now they want to privatize it. I mean, these are functions that were operating very well under city government. Why doesn't private industry come out and try to take Gary's Chicago Airport, this brownfield, and turn that into Chicago's third airport? You know, take some of the tough projects on, but don't cherry pick. Privatization is
great
limited
examples.
benefit.
I'm glad we're privatizing these things. We should continue privatizing and go to the CTA and RTA.
Okay, let's
privatize
have another one
that
of
as
our
well.
members, Jim.